I'm probably going to get some hate for this, but I don't care. Thailand was meant to be a country full of hope and promise, yet deep down I feel completely let down by not only the country of Thailand, but also by the people that I gave better lives to. The whole situation stemmed from a mismatch between what I thought was going on and what was actually taking place, to the point where my life's work was slowly and methodically removed from me under a completely false guise. Does that excuse my actions? Personally, I think it does. But probably, I guess other people would probably say it doesn't. I've come a long way since then, and I want to tell you how I went from being a happy-go-lucky new retiree who finally felt like I belonged somewhere, to being a twisted old man who is still trying to piece together the remnants of my life. There is something ever so wrong with the mentality of many people, and I've come to believe that no matter where you go in the world, the natural order of things is slowly becoming less relevant, less important, and dangerous. I still struggle immensely to come to terms with the slow decline of my life ever since I retired, and while, if I look back at the point in time when I did retire, and fast forward to now, it does look like a very slow decline. I can actually pinpoint certain times in my retirement where that decline was rapid, where chunk after chunk of my life savings was taken away from me. Yet what I did willingly. What I did out of love and what I thought was a shared ambition and dream for a life that I was building together with someone else, my wife, who I thought held me in high regard as being someone cut from a completely different cloth to herself, which in turn should have at least given me a little bit of respect. That didn't happen. But when I realised what was going on, it was too late, and in order to salvage any form of my own personal well-being, I had to do what I did, and I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anyone else, because it really makes you think that there is something very, very wrong with the world. I actually met my Thai wife in a very non-traditional kind of way. When I was 56, and only 4 years away from retirement, I'd gone to Thailand for the first time to scope out whether it would be a place I would be able to stretch my money a lot further. This was back in 2011, and almost immediately I felt a connection to the country that I couldn't quite explain. It was as if Thailand was purely there to give people like me a good retirement. I'm not saying that in a way like I was hoping for that to be the case. I'm saying it because when I arrived and made my way down to Pattaya, when I was there, everything seemed to be so perfect, so cheap, so exciting and so fun, and as many other positive descriptions of the country that I could give. It really was perfect in every single way. From being able to stay in a good hotel for £20 a night, to being able to have a slap-up meal for £4, to being able to meet incredibly beautiful Thai girls who seemed to be happy with so much less than the equivalent girls are happy with today. Like many single guys, I went to the bars of Pattaya and had a wonderful time in all of them. Back then, pricing was still accurate to the country and to the surroundings, and it was that price level that made me fall in love with Thailand. I had a few non-serious relationships with some of the girls that worked in bars, but I knew that wasn't meant to be for anything serious or long-term. But when I met the girl that would become my future wife, I was actually in a hair salon getting my hair cut, and she was the person cutting my hair. I wasn't even planning on having a haircut, but I was walking on my way to Soy Lenki because they had a little bar/restaurant down there at the time that sold a great breakfast, an all-day breakfast because we were already around 1 p.m. Before I made it to that street, that was when I noticed the salon and the girl inside caught my eye, so I thought I'd go ahead and get a haircut first. Luckily, there were no other customers inside, so I took a seat on the chair and she started cutting my hair and we started chatting. She'd just turned 20 and we hit it off straight away. After the haircut, I'd already arranged to meet up with her at a bar that same evening. For the rest of that day, I was feeling very happy. I'd already been in Pattaya for about 2.5 weeks and only had 4 days left before I had to return home and get back to my normal life. But this felt like it could turn into something very real, and that was only after speaking to her while she was cutting my hair for about an hour. I can remember that day very well. After I had my haircut, I didn't go to that place for breakfast. I thought I would go and treat myself to something a bit more substantial. And just off Soy 13/2, I can't remember what the name of the restaurant was, but they had a great steak place there. So I went for a slap-up steak with all the accoutrements, and I think it cost me about 450 baht. Yes, the prices have gone up considerably since then, but at the time you went to Thailand because it was cheap. That was really the main reason for it, I thought. But it was a great meal, and I just hung out having a few beers in a bar close by before returning to my hotel to freshen up. And I headed to the bar where I'd arranged to meet this girl. I don't know what it was, but when I was walking from my hotel to the bar, I felt like I was doing things really well because I hadn't met her in a bar, and this could be something real. I showed up on time and she was already there waiting for me. So we go inside, take a seat, order some drinks, and I can just remember getting lost in the conversation with her. She was from Surin in Isan, and she'd been in Pattaya for around 2 years, and I felt like I'd found someone who hadn't worked in a bar and therefore everything would be easier and better for me. But it was just the way she presented herself. She was so confident, full of life, and she looked exactly like what I would think of if I thought of a Thai girl. She had a little gold bracelet on, which she said she bought for herself recently, and she seemed to be very proud of that because she mentioned how most of the money she earned she sent to her family in Surin. I really respected her work ethic and how she cared for her family, but I didn't know what the family situation in Thailand was like because why would you know if you've never experienced it before? But I finished up that night with her, and one of the reasons I was a little bit scared was because she didn't work in a bar, so I didn't know what would happen after. But she did want to spend the night with me, which I was thankful for, and the following morning, I felt although I was still 4 years away from retirement, I'd already found the girl that I wanted to retire with and spend the rest of my life with. It was one of those things like when you know about it, you actually know that this was it. I spent those last 4 days completely obsessed with her. I was just walking around Pattaya like she was everything for me, and I actually gave her 20,000 baht straight away just so that she wouldn't need to go and work in the salon while I was still there. I remember thinking that I was actually really clever because she wasn't a girl that worked in a bar. I went with her to Non-Nook Gardens, and that cost me around 2,500 baht for everything. I was actually quite proud walking around with her like this was meant to be. Every meal we went for was expensive, more than I spent for myself when I had that steak, for example, because she wanted to go to seafood restaurants where you could pick your fish from the tanks, and some of those meals cost upwards of 3,000 baht, but I didn't care. I started buying her clothes and shoes and things. I probably spent 30,000 baht on shopping, but I thought this was some kind of investment into our future together because I was convinced that we were meant to be. On the last night, we went to a great rooftop bar and I told her that I wanted to take care of her and retire and come back soon. 4 years soon, but that's what I was thinking. When I had to leave the next morning, I was distraught. I gave her another 20,000 baht and made her promise that she'd wait for me, and she said she would. The taxi ride to the airport took ages, or it felt like it did, and the flight home was worse. I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking about how I was going to make this work. When I got back home, everything was awful. After you've experienced Pattaya, home is not the same anymore, and I called her straight away. She answered, and she told me that she missed me, just what I wanted to hear. We talked for over an hour the first time, and that became a constant, and I was just counting down the days until I could retire and move there permanently, even though I knew I didn't have enough money yet and it was still a long way away. Being back at work, that was killing me. I'd been at the same company for a long time, probably over 20 years, but after Thailand, every day felt like I couldn't handle it. I'd just sit there at my desk and all I could think about was being back in Pattaya with her. I'd never been married before in my life, although I did have a 10-year relationship that ended when I was 45, and since then I'd just been working and saving. I'd always rented my own home because I didn't want to buy, I didn't want anything tied up, and I wanted to be able to move as and when I wanted, and I thought that was finally paying off for me. My plan had always been to retire at 60, with £360,000 saved, enough for me to spend 20 years at £1,500 a month. But at the present, I only had 260,000, which meant I needed another 100,000 across 4 years. That was doable on my salary, but difficult. The problem was I couldn't stand another 4 years in that office. I was calling her all the time, and it was the only thing that kept me going, really. She'd talk about what she was doing in the salon, and just listening made me happy. I'd stopped going to the pub, stopped eating out, and I just started eating cheap meals to save everything I could. Then, not long later, she started talking about her dreams of opening her own salon one day. She didn't want to work for anyone else anymore. She said if she had her own place, she could make good money. And she kept mentioning it, how good she was at cutting hair, how she had regular customers who loved her work. And the more we talked about it, the more I started thinking that this could be the answer to getting me to Thailand as quickly as possible. She kept talking about this salon dream of hers, and I was really starting to think it could work for both of us. She was saying that she could make about 100,000 baht profit a month if she had her own place, and that was around £2,000 at the time, I think, and that was great. It made me think that I wouldn't need the full amount I had saved up for. I would need less, and therefore I could go. After months of her talking about it and me thinking about it, I just made the decision. I couldn't stand work anymore. I couldn't wait another 4 years, and there was a Thai girl waiting for me, and I wanted to be with her. I wanted to do that business with her and retire early. I had that 260,000 saved, and I could get 10,000 for my car, and that would give me enough to get started. I just handed in my notice at work one day and quit, and my boss tried to talk me out of it, saying there's only 4 years left, but I didn't care. I'd made up my mind, and it was time to go. I ended up with about £275,000 total, and I thought that was great. The day I flew back to Thailand, though, I was so excited I could barely contain myself. I was thinking about what it was going to be like when I was there, how her salon would look, how our salon would look, and I knew I hadn't hit my savings target, but I was close enough, and it didn't feel like there was any risk because she knew what she was doing. I was retiring early, and I was happy, and I couldn't wait to get started on my new life. When I landed in Bangkok, I was practically running through the airport to get through to immigration, and I wanted to collect my bags. We talked about her meeting me there, and I was so happy to think of seeing her after all that time apart. By all that time, a few months, but it felt like an eternity. I spent a while looking around the arrivals expecting to see her, but she wasn't there. I waited 30 minutes, I'd say, maybe even an hour, just walking up and down, and I kept checking my phone, and finally I had to call her. She answered and said she was so sorry, but she couldn't make it because there was a problem at the salon and her boss needed her there. I was really upset, really upset, because I'd been picturing this big romantic reunion at the airport. But then I thought actually this showed what a hard worker she was, that she took her job seriously even though she knew I was coming to take care of her. Still, I was very disappointed getting in that taxi by myself for the 2-hour trip to Pattaya. The driver kept talking to me. Basic English, you know what the score is in taxis in Thailand, but I wasn't really in the mood for talking. I was just thinking about getting there, seeing her, and hopefully getting on with our life. By the time I got to Pattaya, it was already dark, and I was exhausted from the flight, and also the disappointment. I checked into the hotel I'd booked, which was the one I stayed at before, and it wasn't too expensive, because you didn't need to be expensive, because this was Thailand. I had a quick shower, and I was just waiting there, waiting for her to call, and she said she was on her way. That was when I started to get even more excited and forget about the fact that she hadn't gone to meet me. It was only 20 minutes later when she knocked at the door, and then she was there, even more beautiful than I'd remembered, and she was saying she was sorry that she hadn't seen me at the airport, but she had to do what she had to do. I told her it didn't matter, that we were together now, and that was the only thing that really counted. The rest of that evening was one of the best evenings I'd ever had. We went out for something to eat and just spent time together, talking about the salon and all kinds of things. She kept saying she couldn't believe I'd actually come back for good and that I'd given up everything for her. And I told her that this was part of my retirement and I was going to do this soon anyway. But she made me the luckiest man alive and I couldn't believe she had waited for me. That's how I said it to her. The next morning, when I woke up and she was there, I knew that I wanted to marry her. We hadn't talked about it or anything, but I just said to her right then if she wanted to, and she said yes, without much hesitation. She said she'd never been so happy in her life, but had she? I don't know. Was she just saying that? I then told her I wanted her to quit her job at the salon straight away because I wanted to take care of everything from now on. And I gave her 300,000 baht just to make sure that she did it. I actually changed the money at the airport getting a bad rate, and perhaps I shouldn't have done that. But you only have to make the mistake once to not do it again. She actually called her boss straight away, saying that she quit, and it felt great for her. At least that's what she said. It was so good to be back with her, to be with her, talking about what we were going to do. And the wedding, everything was moving so quickly. The idea was to have a ceremony in her village so that her family could be happy with it. I was fine with whatever she wanted. I just wanted to make her happy, and the fact that she was there with me, that was making me so happy. Then she started talking about sinsot, which is the dowry that I would need to pay for her parents, and she said that it would probably be about 500,000 baht, plus about 25 baht gold for her mother. I'd read about it online and I knew what it was. I knew what I was getting myself into before I even asked her to marry me, and I was already good with it. We did, however, decide to wait a few months before the wedding, which would give me time to sort out my visa and a bank account and everything else, and she said she'd start looking for the perfect location for the salon in the meantime. That evening, we went out for another massive celebration dinner. I think that's what we did all the time in the early days, and it was another seafood place that she always wanted to go to. I didn't even look at the prices. She ordered lobster and prawns and crab, and the bill was something crazy like 8,000 baht. I was pretty shocked, but I didn't care. What could I have done? The fact that she was my fiancée, that made everything okay, and we were planning our future together. I really thought like I'd made the right decision by going to Thailand and being with her, and I wasn't sitting in that office anymore. That was the thing. I was there with her in what many people would describe as paradise. The next 3 months just flew by, and I was loving every single minute of it. I'd already got my retirement visa sorted out, which was actually not that difficult. All you had to do was show money in the bank and leave it there for a few months, and if you're over 50, you get it. As part of the visa, I'd also got the bank account sorted out, and I just transferred on all my money. It got about 12 million baht, give or take, and seeing that number in the bank made me feel like I was set for life. We found a great condo to rent in Jom Tiem, right on the beach, and it had a sea view from the balcony. It was about 15,000 baht a month, which seemed like a lot, given the fact that you could stay in a hotel for that price, but I thought it was worth it for the view. And from there, my typical days were great. I'd wake up whenever I wanted, have a coffee, sitting on the balcony looking at the ocean, and then just go for a walk. It was such a great experience to be living in Thailand, just like I wanted, and to have her with me, all these plans, all these hopes, it was amazing. We'd go for lunch usually out every single day, probably spending 500 baht on lunch, which wasn't so bad, and in evenings we'd spend a bit more for dinner, and I was trying to sort of ignore the fact that I was spending a little bit too much money when everything was being added up. Probably, some days 3,000 to 4,000 baht every single day, which was way more than I planned, but I was thinking about the salon, making money, and everything would change. The salon was what we talked about most of the time, and I was actually getting really excited about it, reading up about everything, what we needed to do, what she would need to do, and how we would manage everything. She was already talking to girls she knew could work for us, and she said she had lots of customers from her old job who would follow her to the new place. I felt amazing to be involved with this project. I was full of energy and excitement about this amazing future that was lined up. Life couldn't have been better. It could not have been better than it was. And the wedding was coming up soon as well, which would make everything even better than that. Up in Surin for the wedding ceremony, I was actually quite nervous myself because I hadn't met her family before. And the village was probably about 5 hours from Pattaya, and it was a lot more rural than I expected it to be. Lots of dirt roads after you got off the main road, and mostly wooden houses, but I found it very peaceful there. Her family's house was actually a little bit bigger than most, but it blended in very well with the surroundings, and her parents seemed genuinely happy to meet me. I had to pay for all the food and drinks for the wedding, and after all that, it was going to be about 100,000 baht, but I didn't think it was too bad. I remember though standing thinking the village was beautiful. It was quiet and peaceful, and I could actually see myself living there one day when we were older. All the people were so friendly, and it was like they wanted to get to know me, but we couldn't speak each other's languages. After the wedding, we went back to Pattaya, did the official registration at the district office. That wasn't as dramatic as the actual in-person wedding in the village, it was just signing papers. And then we went to Koh Samet for a week for our honeymoon. We stayed in a great resort on the beach and spent most of the time talking about the salon. She was excited about it, and I was completely caught up in her enthusiasm, thinking that this was going to be the start of our business empire. The honeymoon alone cost me about 80,000 baht, but I didn't care about the money because I was married to the most beautiful woman in the world in my mind, and she loved me, and we were about to start this business together, and it was going to make my life even better. When I kept thinking about my old life and my old job and the bad weather and the shocking loneliness, I couldn't believe how much everything had changed. This is what I'd worked all those years for, and this was now my reward, and it was even better than I'd dreamed it being. I wasn't planning on opening an actual Thai company though, when it came to opening up the salon. I was just happy to do everything in my wife's name, because she was the expert when it came to running a salon, and I was just there to invest and spend most of my time in the background. I planned to spend a lot of the time at the business, but also, because it was going to be based right in central Pattaya, there would be a lot of things for me to do to keep me occupied while she was managing the salon. While we were living in Jomtien, I much preferred it there because it was a little bit out of the madness, yet very close to the madness as well. But in terms of the business, we wanted it to be right in the thick of it. As soon as we got back from Koh Samet, we started the hunt for some premises in a good location. The one where my wife used to work near Soi Lenki would have been perfect, but that was someone else's salon, so we just needed something similar, and it was my wife who actually managed to find a suitable location. That's the thing though, because it was such a good location, it would involve spending a little bit of key money in order to take over the lease, even though we would be doing a different business from there. I was shocked, really shocked, when I heard it was going to be 2 million baht. It was a lot more than expected. But my wife informed me that this was a very good price given the fact that it was just off one of the sois on Soi Bukaw. There were a few bars on the street, and because of that, we would have an endless supply of clientele. I spent about a week thinking long and hard if this would be a good investment, but my wife was very persistent that it would be, so I caved in, and we went for it. She said she expected to be able to make about 100,000 a month for herself, which would therefore be for us, and also there would be staff costs to pay because she would want people to work with her. The actual rent was about 40,000 baht, which I thought was a lot, but the way she described it, it did seem like it would be foolish not to take advantage of this opportunity, because it was everything that she was looking for. We decided to take over the lease, and I spent another 1 million baht completely renovating the place into a fantastic salon, and 2 months later, we were ready to open, and my wife was the happiest I'd ever seen her, and I'd seen her happy before. I felt like this was the start of something big for the both of us, something good, and I was even starting to think that the type of house or condo we could buy in a few years' time because I was so confident it was going to work. When we opened the salon, my wife was really excited, and the place was actually pretty busy from day one. Busy is relevant, I suppose. She'd hired 2 girls to work with her, and they were both from Isan just like she was, and they were really keen. I was paying them both 20,000 baht each, which my wife said was good money for them, and my wife was taking 40,000 for herself as the manager. The thing was, though, I was still paying the rent on top of that, another 40,000 baht, and because my wife said she was working too hard to have to pay for the rent as well, she needed that income for herself. What I'm trying to say is that when everything added up, she was getting money, the staff were getting money, but they weren't bringing enough to cover that as well as the rent. So I was out of pocket for the rent in the early stages, which I wasn't entirely happy about. But I thought once things got busier, it would all be okay. The money, though, that was coming in was definitely less than we'd expected. The 100,000 profit was not coming, but she just said it was low season, and it were going to get better soon and make even more then, and it should average out. That was what she kept saying, and I believed her, because I understood how the difference between low and high season worked. High season was when all the tourists came, and therefore there would be lots more girls there who needed to use the salon, and because of that, the real money would be made then. We also decided to actually add nail services before the high season came, which meant buying a lot more equipment and training up one of the girls, and that cost me about 500,000 baht. But my wife was convinced that this would make all the difference, and I was happy to go ahead. I sat in the salon most days, watching everyone work and watching the customers come and go, and it did seem to be picking up the closer we got to high season and things seemed to be getting better and better. I was starting to get a little bit worried because I was going through so much money. It wasn't just on the business, but our living expenses too, and my money was going down, but I was just waiting for high season to come around, and when it did, I was desperate for some good news. At this point, I'd already invested about 3.5 million into the business and spent another million on living expenses and everything else since getting married, so I was hoping for high season to be a success. And I have to admit, the salon was definitely busy during high season, and there were definitely more tourists around, more people walking past, and the girls were coming into the salon at a high rate of knots, and my wife seemed to be in her element, chatting to all the people, recommending treatments and managing all the other girls, and I was proud watching her. It seemed to work, and at the end of high season, she told me that we did have good news. She'd managed to save 750,000 baht. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe that she'd managed to make and save that amount of money, and maybe the business would work after all. If I look back, I have to question whether that money actually came from the salon or if she had gotten it from other things. I didn't really know. But at the time, I was just relieved to see some return on my investment. She was proud of herself, saying she'd proved the business could work, and I'd been right to trust her. And we celebrated with a massive night out that cost a lot, but it was worth it. The thing was, though, even with that 750,000, I was still well down overall on the business. But I kept thinking that this was long term. Once we got established, once we had regular customers, everything would come good and this would just repeat year on year. So after high season finished, my wife said that she needed a break, and we went to Koh Samet for a week. I was happy to go because she'd been working so hard and she definitely deserved it. And while we were there, sitting on the beach one evening, she brought up an idea to me about building a house in her village. She said that the business had proved itself now, it was successful, so we needed to think about our future, about having a proper home of our own. She'd already talked to her parents that there was land available next to their house and we could buy it. She said she had that 750,000 from the salon and she asked if I could match it or even put in a bit more, so we could build something that was good. I thought about it for a few days. I didn't agree straight away, and it did make sense to me. I found that the property in Thailand was very cheap compared to England, and if we had our own house, that would mean no rent to pay in the future when we lived there. Plus, I was also starting to really like the idea of having a place in the village for when I was older, because it was peaceful and I could actually live there and not be surrounded by all the craziness of Pattaya. The thing was, though, I agreed to put in 2.5 million baht, which with her 750,000 would be 3.25 million. Enough to buy the land, build a really nice house, but it was a lot of money and I don't know why I agreed to it. She was so excited. She showed me pictures on her phone of the style of house she wanted, and she wanted to have a big kitchen, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a proper Western-style place, but in the village. We spent the rest of that week on Koh Samet just planning everything, and I was getting excited about it. I kept thinking that this was real progress in our relationship. We went straight from Koh Samet to her village, and I have to say I was impressed with how quickly they had actually moved on everything. Her father had already talked to a local builder, and they had the plans drawn up within days. This was before we even arrived. Apparently, she'd been speaking to her parents before we left, which I wasn't aware of. The land was 500,000 baht, which I thought seemed reasonable for about 1 rai of land, and the house was quoted at 2.7 million. My wife was the one who handled all the negotiations, and I was just agreeing with everything that she said, because this did seem like it could be the perfect place to live in the future. It was so different from Pattaya. It was quiet and it was peaceful, and I could, as I've said countless times, see myself spending more time there and living there permanently. The builder said the house would take about 6 months, could be less, could be more, but not to worry if it took 7 instead of 6, and that was okay. And my wife was constantly on the phone making sure that things were going well when we were back down in Pattaya. She kept saying that this was great, this was an investment for our future, and I believed her because it was. That's what it was, at least that's what it was meant to be. I was thinking about maybe getting a car once the house was ready, so we could drive up there whenever we wanted, and make it a proper second home. My wife was already planning how we'd decorate it, and she was talking about the furniture that she would want. Apparently, she wanted to get European-style furniture from Bangkok, and I didn't really understand. Surely they had shops in Surin, but I was okay with her going along with it. At this point, I was down to around 7 million baht, which was still plenty, I thought. But once the house was built, that would be the biggest expense done. Everything seemed to be falling so well into place, the business we had, the house, and our life. I remember thinking that even though I'd spent more money than I'd planned, everything was going well, and it was all real. Back in Pattaya, the salon was doing well as well. Not amazingly as in high season, but it was okay enough that the rent was being covered without me having to pay for it. And my wife was taking around 30,000 a month for herself after paying for everything. It wasn't a lot of money, not as much as she'd predicted, but it was still enough for her. I was feeling good about things because I wasn't burning through money anymore. About 3 months later, we went to check on the progress of the house, and I was amazed about how much they'd already done. Everything was sort of there, well, the basic shell was, and it looked really good, a lot better than I'd expected it to. The construction seemed to be of great quality, and everything was done just right. I suppose her parents were there every day supervising, and even though I was paying for it, well, mostly, they wanted it to be right for their daughter, so I thought they were doing it for us. Well, I don't know, never mind. My wife, though, was very excited, showing me around each room as if I couldn't see it myself. She wanted to explain where all the furniture would go like I didn't have a say, but at the time I wanted her to be happy and that's what it was all about. I was actually starting to think that we should just move there sooner rather than later. Just keep the salon running with the staff and she can take the profits. When I mentioned this to my wife, she seemed keen on the idea, saying once the house was finished we could try and see how it worked. We went back to Pattaya feeling really good about everything. The salon was covering costs, we had a beautiful house being built, and I was thinking life was finally settling in to what it should be. I was spending less money than before as well, maybe 50,000 a month. That was for our living expenses. And the fact that the salon was paying for itself, what more could I have wanted? Then my wife came to me with a new proposal. She said that her friend from the salon she used to work with wanted to open her place as well, and she'd seen how successful we were and wanted to copy us. My wife's idea was that we'd invest the money, own the salon, but her friend would run it and we'd take the profits. It would be like having a second location without my wife having to work herself to death trying to manage both. Although I was hesitant about it because I'd already put in so much money, my wife kept saying that this is how we could build a business empire and we could expand because the opportunity was now here. She said that her friend had found a perfect location in Jomtien. Apparently there were lots of people there from many different countries who could actually use this. Different to her sort of deal because we targeted the girls that worked in the bars around, but even still, this could be good. The rent was only 30,000 baht on the place that they'd already found, and the total investment would be about 2 million, which included taking over a building and fitting it out. I wasn't really sure though in terms of the money, but the idea was fun. My wife was so confident, and her friend seemed to be very confident. Apparently she'd trained in Bangkok and had a real following of customers. And the more we talked about it, the more it seemed like we'd be foolish not to. In the end, I agreed, thinking this could be the start of a chain of salons and we could build a business empire. So I gave my wife the 2 million. She and her friend spent weeks getting it ready, and I have to admit, it looked good when it was finished. It was really professional. But only a month after opening, my wife came home in tears, saying her friend had stolen everything and disappeared. Apparently, she'd been taking the money from the till every day and not paying suppliers and the staff and everything, not paying the rent, and she'd just vanished, with about 500,000 in cash and equipment. I wanted to go straight to the police, but my wife said we couldn't because they hadn't been paying proper taxes on the business and it would cause problems for us, maybe even affect my visa. That's what she said. I was absolutely furious, but I also felt stupid for trusting this friend that I'd never properly met. Looking back now, I wonder if the friend ever existed, or if it was just a way to get another 2 million baht out of me. At the time though, I believed my wife was as upset as I was, and we just had to write it off as a very expensive lesson. After that disaster with the second salon, I was really starting to worry about money. I'd now spent around 10 million baht of my original 12 million, and I was getting nothing back from it really. The original salon was bringing in some money, but my wife was keeping it all, saying she was the one doing the work so she should get the salary. When I pointed out that I'd invested everything, she just said that I was her husband, we were married, what was hers was mine, and what was mine was hers. but it didn't feel like that when she had money and I was paying for everything else. Some months she'd make 50,000 baht profit after paying the staff and the rent, but she'd spend it on clothes and gold and sending money to her family and never contributing to our living expenses. I was paying for our condo in Jomtien, all our food, utilities and everything, and she acted like that was just how it was supposed to be. I tried to talk to her about it several times, saying we needed to be a team and share the income and the expenses, but then she'd get angry, saying I didn't appreciate how hard she worked. She told me I just sat around all day while she was the one working. The problem was she didn't understand that the idea was this was meant to pay for our lives together, because I'd invested in it. The house in the village at this point was nearly finished, and I was thinking maybe, if we moved there, we could live more cheaply, because I couldn't afford to keep living without her sharing the income. I thought things would be better there. I brought up that idea again, saying she could keep the salon running with just the staff and take the profits without having to work there herself. She thought about it and actually agreed, saying she was tired of working so hard and maybe living in the village would be good for both of us. I was relieved because I figured living there would be much cheaper. I thought 20,000 a month instead of the 60 or 70 I was spending in Pattaya. Plus, if she wasn't working in the salon herself, she couldn't justify keeping all the money. Surely she'd share the profits with me. I was down to about 2 million baht in the bank, which was still enough to live on for a number of years if we were careful, but I was a long way away from the comfortable retirement that I'd planned. I had to keep telling myself, though, that we had the salon as an asset, we had the house, and things weren't as bad as they seemed. And when the house was finally ready, we packed up everything from Pattaya and moved up to the village permanently. The house itself was amazing. I have to admit that it was probably one of the nicest houses in the whole village. I mean, it was because most of the others were shacks. It had proper bathrooms, air conditioning in every single room, a Western kitchen. It was everything I could want. I remember arriving with our car full of our stuff, and I felt relaxed in that moment because here I could spend less money. By the time we made it to living in the village, I guess I had about 1.5 million baht. All the money seems to go so quickly. And I told my wife straight that I needed her to share at least 30,000 baht a month from the salon to make everything work. She agreed, saying that the staff could run it and she'd go down once a month to check on things and to make sure everything was going okay. And for the first 3 months, that's what happened. She gave me 30,000 baht each month, which covered our expenses in the village with a bit left over. For the first time in a long time, I was starting to relax, thinking we'd finally found a perfect way to do things. But then, after those 3 months, my wife came back from one of her trips to Pattaya with bad news. She said her friend, who was working at the salon, had basically taken it over, changed the locks and said it was hers now. My wife said there was nothing we could do because the lease was in her name, but she'd never properly registered it as a business, so it was legally complicated. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, that we'd just lost the business that I'd invested 3.5 million baht into just like that. I wanted to drive straight to Pattaya and sort it myself, but my wife begged me not to, saying it would cause problems, maybe violence, and it wasn't worth it. Again, I have to look back at this point and actually think, is this true? Were her version of events real? Or had she sold it? Or was she just keeping it and didn't want to give me any money? But at the time, I was too shocked and depressed to really fight about it. My wife said for only 500,000 baht, she could actually open a salon in the village. It would be smaller, no competition, and it wouldn't make a lot, but it should make enough for us to live there. I agreed to go ahead, and because of it, I was down to less than 1 million baht, which was terrifying. But if she could even make enough for us to live in the village, it would have been worth it. Watching my bank balance drop below that 7 figures for the first time was petrifying, but also it was meant to be for a reason. Not long after, the salon opened in the village, and it was a decent place, although it didn't have anywhere near as many customers as she explained it would, or that I thought it would. It was as if people didn't want to get their hair done all the time, and I suppose I understand why. To start with, my wife was actually charging prices that she charged in Pattaya, but no one was biting. And then she could barely make anything when she reduced the prices. Some days she'd sit there for the whole day and make 200 baht, which wasn't even enough to cover lots of the bills, the electric and the water and everything else that went along with it. Her family, they came for free haircuts and she didn't charge them, and then friends, they expected discounts, so it was more like her cutting hair and not making any money at all. Meanwhile, her family was constantly at our house, and somehow I was always the one buying things for everyone and giving money for things, even if I didn't want to. In over 3 months, I must have given out another 100,000 baht to various family members. Didn't want to, but I found myself doing it anyway just to keep the peace. My wife would tell me that I had to help because I was part of the family, and refusing would make her lose face. Watching my money disappear was awful, and I started to panic. I'd worked my whole life for all this money, saved everything, and now it was just going in front of me. I tried again to talk to my wife about the salon in Pattaya, saying that we really needed to get it back, but she just said it was impossible. She said we had to forget about it. I couldn't understand how she could be so calm about losing something that we'd put so much money into, but I was starting to think that she'd probably planned the whole thing, and maybe the salon in Pattaya was still hers. She was just telling me that it wasn't. I was getting really paranoid about everything, and I didn't know what to do. I found out nothing when I investigated because I didn't know how to look into things because I wasn't Thai and I didn't speak the language. But my wife opened this salon in the village. It didn't work. Then I tried to talk to her about the salon in Pattaya, but she's not interested in finding out what to do. We can't do anything, she said, and that was it. I barely had enough money to live for about a year at this point after another few months, and I didn't know what to do about it. I felt like I couldn't go back to England with nothing. I sold everything and I'd burned all my bridges, and I was trapped in this village with a wife who I was starting to think had played me from the very start. While the house was great, you can't eat a house, can you? You can't live off a house. Being at that age, I was too young to die, but it also felt like I was too old to start again, and I was terrified about what was going to happen. I was becoming more and more certain that everything had been a setup from the start. The way that the businesses had failed, everything seemed to be too convenient for her. It was all like that. And my wife seemed to have somehow got over 10 million baht out of me one way or the other, and what did I have to show for it? Nothing. I had a house that I couldn't sell because it was in her name in a village where I couldn't even do anything or spend time if I was by myself. It was awful, and I started questioning everything, every word she'd ever said to me. Everything. Was it real? Was anything real? I was drinking more, sitting outside with a bottle of Leo, and I just wanted to get out of my own mind somehow, but I never could. The more I drank, the better I felt initially, but the worse I felt after. And her mother started to irritate me. She walked around wearing gold that I'd probably paid for, acting like the queen of the village. I'd see her coming and just want to scream at her, tell her that her daughter had destroyed my life, but what was the point? They'd all just pretend not to understand English, which they didn't really, so what was I meant to do? My wife, though, she started saying that she needed to go back to work in Pattaya. She couldn't sit in the village not doing anything, and she wanted to earn money. I knew what it meant. She was going back to work in a salon or whatever it is, go back to her own salon that she'd lied to me about. I couldn't stop her because I had no money to give her and no way to do anything. She told me that I could stay in the house and she'd send money for me when she was working. I actually laughed when she said that, because we both knew that she was never going to send me anything, even though I hoped she would. I was the one who was supposed to give money, apparently, not receive it. That's how it had always been. But I agreed because I didn't have any other choice. I couldn't afford to go back to Pattaya with her, couldn't afford to live anywhere else really except this house that we'd built. One day, a few days later, she just packed her things and left, saying she'd call me when she got there. As she drove away in the car that I'd bought, taking her back to Pattaya, I was just stranded in a village where I couldn't speak to or communicate with anybody else. I didn't know anyone except her family, who probably all knew what had happened to everything. And that night I got way too drunk and woke up the following morning wondering what the point of all of it was. My wife had been gone for about a week when she called me with an emergency. She was crying on the phone, saying she'd had an accident on a motorbike and was in the hospital. She needed 120,000 baht for the bill, and she had nobody else to ask. I nearly hung up on her, thinking this was just another scam, but something in her voice sounded genuinely scared. I asked which hospital it was, and she told me, and I said I'd go to Pattaya to see for myself before I paid anything. I had to get a bus down there. It took an awful long time, 5 hours or so, in a really uncomfortable bus. It was only 150 baht though, so it wasn't too bad, and then I went straight to the hospital. She was really there, she was really injured, and her leg was all bandaged up, and her face was scraped and bruised. I saw the bill as well, and it was legitimate, 120,000 baht for surgery on her leg and a few nights in the hospital. That was probably the only time in our whole relationship where I knew for certain that she wasn't lying to me. I paid the bill, using almost all of my remaining money. I guess I had less than 300,000 baht left at this point, and she thanked me. I stayed with her for a few hours, and for a moment in time, it felt like the early days when I thought she really loved me and things were real. And she promised me she'd send money as soon as she was working again. She said she'd already lined up a job at a salon, and she couldn't wait to get started. I went back to the village a few days later feeling absolutely empty. I'd helped her because I thought I had to. I couldn't let my wife just lie there in hospital. Even after everything, I couldn't do that. But now I was down to nothing. Well, nearly, and I didn't know what to do. She called me when she got out of the hospital, thanking me again, saying she's going to start work in a few days. But I'd just said okay, and I didn't really want to speak to her, so I just hung up. I knew I'd never see any more money from her, because I thought our marriage was over, even if we were technically together. 3 months went by after the hospital incident, and not a single baht came from my wife. I was living on about 15,000 baht every month, eating awful food and drinking the cheapest whiskey I could find because I wanted to get drunk, but I didn't want to pay for it. I didn't have any money left now, and I mean no money, maybe 50,000 baht. And when I called my wife asking if she can send me some money, she just said no way, she's not working for me. I'm not her real family. That really hurt me when she said that. As if, why wasn't I her real family? She's happy to send money to her mother and father, but not me. I really, really hated that, and I didn't know what to do about it. When no money was forthcoming from her for around 3 months, and the fact that my money had basically run out, that's when I finally understood that the whole thing can't have been true. I thought I was building something together with my wife, who I loved more than anything in the world, and I thought that she thought the same thing. However, the more I think about it now, the more it seems that the whole thing was a setup from the start. I was so furious that she had done this to me that I had barely enough money to scrape together for a plane ticket back to my own country that I started thinking about what to do. Her family lived close by, her mother and father, and since I'd been in the village, I'd helped them out with money on countless occasions. I'd given them money when I got married to my wife, and I guess I'd probably given them over 1 million baht in total, probably more, if I think about it, because that was for the sin sort alone, the money and the gold. I gave it to them for my wife, not for them, and they seemed to be completely oblivious to the struggles I was having. What made things worse was the gold that her mother used to wear. Really big gold necklaces and bracelets and a few rings, and she walked around like she owned the whole village. I started to resent her. The fact that she could just live there without any care in the world, and I couldn't, even though I'd spent all this money on the house. I'd had enough. When I called my wife, saying that I really needed some money, and she was meant to send me some, she just said she needed money for herself and for her family, and she didn't have enough to give to me. She said I should go back to England and make my own money. That's what she said, and that was awful. I couldn't believe she said that, even though I invested in all those businesses, in the house, on the understanding that I was going to get something out of this that would see me until the end of my life. I just completely snapped. I didn't want to see her ever again. One day, I got very drunk, and, as is the case with many days, her mother and father were at the farm, and I walked to their house, which you could see from our house, and I walked straight inside. I was thinking I was going to go and take a piece of gold and leave straight back to Bangkok, straight on a plane home, because I never wanted anything more to do with them. What I found, though, shocked me. She had 500,000 baht in cash in a drawer, and next to that, she had about 25 baht weight of gold, which at the time was probably worth around 600,000 baht. Not to mention all the gold that was draped all over her body at the farm. As far as I was concerned in the moment, that cash and gold represented money that I had given to them, and therefore, if they're able to save it, they didn't need it, and I did something that I'd never done before, and I've not done since. I quickly looked around, seeing no one was watching, and put all the cash and gold into my bag, went straight back to my house, took all my stuff, said goodbye to the house and jumped on the motorcycle into town, where I found someone to drive me straight to Bangkok, straight to the airport, via a gold shop to sell that gold. When I got to the airport, I booked the next flight straight back to England. I'd stolen the money that I'd given to them, and I left without saying anything.